Hello, Who Dey Nation! I'm Matt Donnelly, and this is your High Point Sports Cincinnati Bengals, Pittsburgh Steelers Week 16 preview. This week, the Cincinnati Bengals travel to Pittsburgh to take on the 7-7 Steelers in an all-important AFC North showdown. Back in Week 12, it was the Steelers that beat the Bengals 16-10, making this that much more of an important game for the Bengals this week. In that game, Kenny Pickett and Pat Freiermuth hooked up 9 times for 120 yards. Cincinnati has had a problem defending opposing tight ends all season long, allowing 16.3 fantasy points per game this season to the position and over 19.5 fantasy points over the last 4 weeks. But it won't be Kenny Pickett, nor will it be Mitch Trubisky under center for the Steelers this week, as they will be making a change under center. Mike Tomlin has said that Mason Rudolph deserves an opportunity and has been taking first-team reps throughout the week. Steelers fans have been calling for Rudolph all week long. I say, be careful what you ask for. Rudolph has a career record of 9-8-1. His career completion percentage is just 61.5. He's thrown for 2,369 yards, 16 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. With this move, I am not feeling Deontay Johnson or George Pickens when it comes to fantasy, but I am worried about Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren as they can be leaned on heavily against this Bengals defense that is allowing 4.7 yards per carry, and they just allowed 123 yards on 23 carries by Ty Chandler last week. As for the running game, Najee Harris averaged 6.6 yards per carry in that Week 12 contest, finishing with 99 yards on the ground, while Jaylen Warren would finish with 49 yards on the ground on 13 carries and 13 yards on 3 receptions. With the loss of DJ Reader for the Bengals in that heart of that Bengals run defense, someone is going to need to step up and fill that void if the Bengals are going to stop the bleeding. With no Reader, it'll be up to Logan Wilson, Jermaine Pratt, Sam Hubbard, and Trey Hendrickson to elevate this defense. Hendrickson is playing at an all-pro level right now and needs more love from the media. 15 sacks this season, trails TJ Watt by 1 for the overall lead. He also has been consistently getting to the quarterback all season long, having produced at least a half a sack or more in 12 of the 14 Bengals contests this season, and he has 13 or more sacks in 3 of the last 4 years. Let's put some respect on Hendrickson's name already, will we? If you're looking for a sneaky play at tight end this week, or you're desperate in fantasy football, when we're talking about those fantasy football semifinals, Tanner Hudson brings a little bit of intrigue. Last week against the Vikings, Hudson caught all 5 of his targets for 49 yards and has a favorable matchup this week against the Steelers defense that has been allowing 18.15 fantasy points to the position themselves over the previous 4 weeks, which happens to be the second most behind only the Bengals. The Steelers' run defense is in the middle of the pack there as far as fantasy is concerned over the last 4 weeks, allowing just 20.7 fantasy points per game while limiting opposing wide receivers to just 17.55 over that same period of time, which is the fewest in the league. Jake Browning has been playing as well as any signal caller over the last 3 weeks, averaging 23.4 fantasy points per game, with 20 fantasy points being his lowest over that time. Browning has thrown for 275 yards in each of those 3 contests while averaging 9.1 yards per attempt. Browning just led this Bengals team to a 14-point comeback and overtime victory last week, thanks to a fourth quarter in which his passer rating was 140.6, 12 of 16 passing there for 140 yards and a pair of touchdowns, including that game-tying pass to T. Higgins in the corner of the end zone. Higgins will need to play a vital role once again this week. I mentioned that the Steelers secondary has been very unforgiving when it comes to opposing wide receivers in fantasy. We know that Jamar Chase is dealing with that AC joint injury there. We also know that Zach Taylor did suggest, like the rest of us, that Chase will be day to day. If Chase can't play, you have to figure that he is going to be limited in some fashion. Now Higgins, he caught 4 of 8 targets last week against the Vikings, with half of those receptions leading to touchdowns along with 61 yards. Last season, the Bengals, they did play 4 games without Chase, and in those 4 games, Higgins would go on to see a 26.2% target share, average 92.8 yards per game, and a weekly top 24 finish at wide receiver in all 4 games as far as fantasy is concerned. That trend, it carried over to Browning, who targeted Higgins 25% of the time after Chase was injured. The Steelers will be without DeMonte Casey, a repeat offender who has been given the Draymond Green type treatment here and suspended for the rest of the season for the hellacious hit on Michael Pittman last week. It's not going to be just Higgins who's going to need to pick up the slack for this Bengals team. This Bengals team had 6 players finish with more than 45 total yards in offense last week, including Chase, along with the previously mentioned there Tanner Hudson, Tyler Boyd, Joe Mixon, and Chase Brown. Now, Brown and Mixon, they split the backfield last week, with Brown earning a season-high 31.8% rush share, while Mixon saw his lowest rush share rate of 45.5%. Mixon has seen his backfield touches drop in each of the last 3 weeks, so that is a little bit of concern there, but he continues to be featured in the red zone and earns those goal-to-go touches, which will continue to help his fantasy stock. Let's not just forget that it was his second effort midway through the fourth quarter last week on that 4th and goal carry there that was pivotal to this team's success, and him tying Rudy Johnson for the second most rushing touchdowns in team history. Mixon, he's going to continue to be an RB2 from here on out, but with the additional rush share heading towards Chase Brown and Chase Brown's big playability, Brown finds himself as a weekly sleeper and fantasy flex option. I expect Browning to remain hot against the Steelers this week and this offense to find some form of success. If they do, that means they would have found a way to contain TJ Watt as well as find a way to limit the Steelers' run game. For Browning and the Bengals, the best way to stop the Steelers from running is to try and flip that script, something that they are capable of doing. But in these AFC North battles, it's easier said than done. With that being said, there's only one more thing to say, and that's Who Dey Nation. Let's go.